All right, so let's jump into something that I think could be really relevant to a lot of our listeners out there. We're talking about list pendens in New York real estate. You guys have sent in some articles about this, and it's something that could be a pretty big deal if you're, thinking about buying or selling property here. Imagine you found that perfect house.
Yeah.
But then you discover there's some kind of legal issue hanging over it. Well, that's where this term list pendens comes into play. Luckily, we've got an expert here to help us unpack this whole thing.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So first off, just for anyone who's not familiar with this term, what exactly is a list pendens?
Okay, so basically a list pendens, it's like a legal red flag. It's a formal document that gets filed with the county clerk's office. And it basically lets the world know that there's a lawsuit going on that could impact a specific property.
So it's like a big warning sign, like, hey, watch out, there's some legal issues going on here.
Yeah, exactly. And it means that the ownership of that property might not be completely clear. You've got this lawsuit going on, so it's like this cloud hanging over the property until things get sorted out in court.
So you're saying this cloud, this list pendens, can cause some serious problems for people
Yeah.
who are trying to buy or sell property.
Oh, definitely. I mean, first of all, it can completely halt a sale. Imagine you're all set to buy a house and then boom, you discover there's a list pendens attached to it. That makes it super complicated to move forward. And sometimes it can make it basically impossible until that lawsuit is settled.
So the property is basically in limbo.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's not just buyers who need to be concerned about this.
Yeah.
Let's say you're a seller. If you don't disclose a list pendens to a potential buyer, that can get you into some serious legal hot water.
Wow, this is getting a little scary. Okay, so let's say I'm the buyer in this situation. I'm looking to buy a property, and I find out there's a list pendens. Does that mean that I'm somehow inheriting that whole legal mess?
Well, essentially, yes. You're basically stepping right into that ongoing lawsuit, which means you could face delays, you could get hit with legal fees, and you're likely to experience a whole lot of headaches. And you're going to have a really hard time getting a mortgage. Lenders get very, very cautious when they see that there's a list pendens attached to a property.
So I guess it's not always as simple as just finding a house you love and buying it. There's all this stuff going on behind the scenes. Okay, so let's back up a bit. How does a list pendens even get filed in the first place? Who makes that decision?
So it all starts with a lawsuit that directly relates to a property. Like you could have neighbors who are fighting over property lines, or there might be a dispute about who actually owns a property. It's usually the person who starts the lawsuit, the plaintiff, who decides to file the list pendens.
So any legal battle that could affect who owns a property could potentially lead to a list pendens.
Right. Once the lawsuit is filed, the plaintiff can go to the county clerk's office in the county where the property is located and file that list pendens.
And then at that point, it becomes public knowledge.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Transparency is really important here.
So what exactly needs to be included in this list of pendens document?
So there are a few key things that need to be in there. You have to clearly list all the parties involved in the lawsuit. And you need to give a very detailed description of what that lawsuit is about. What are the core issues that are being disputed? You also have to include information about the court that's handling the case, like the name of the court and the case number. And probably most importantly, you need to include a very clear and specific description of the property itself.
So it's not just a quick note saying, hey, these two people are suing each other over this address. You need to provide the full legal rundown.
Yeah, you need to be really specific. The goal is to make sure that anyone who looks at that document knows exactly what's going on and how it might impact that particular property.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we established that this list pendens gets filed. It becomes public record. And it basically puts this freeze on the property until the lawsuit is resolved. But how long does that freeze actually last?
So, in New York, a list pendens is active for 3 years from the date that it was filed.
Okay, so 3 years and then it's gone. Everything goes back to normal.
Well, not exactly. The person who filed the lawsuit, the plaintiff, they can actually ask the court for an extension before that 3-year mark hits.
Oh, so they can ask for more time. Why would they want to do that?
Well, they need to show the court that they have good cause, a valid reason why that list pendens should stay in place. Maybe the lawsuit is taking longer than expected because of court delays. Or maybe there are some really complex issues that need more time to be sorted out. It's not automatic, though. The court has the final say on whether or not to grant that extension.
Right, so there could be legitimate reasons why a lawsuit drags on. So we've got this initial 3-year window. But it can potentially be stretched out if the plaintiff can convince the court that there's a good reason for it. You mentioned something earlier that I wanted to circle back to. You talked about a no second chance rule. What does that mean?
Ah, yes. This is where things can get a little tricky. So once a lis pendens is canceled, either because the lawsuit's been settled, or the case was dismissed, or it simply expired after that 3-year period, you can't just go and file a new one
Right.
for the same issue.
Whoa, so you only get one shot at this.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to understand the timing and to have a really solid legal strategy in place. If you're dealing with the lis pendens, one of the articles you sent in actually highlights this point really well.
You're talking about the Strong Island Contracting Corp.v Padilla case.
That's the one. This case shows how crucial timing is when you're dealing with lis pendens and extensions.
So I'm guessing things didn't go so well for Strong Island Contracting in that case.
Well, they initially got an extension on their lis pendens, but then they had a change of lawyers, and there were some court delays, and it just kind of threw everything off track. Right before the deadline, they tried to get another extension. But because of all these procedural issues, the court ended up canceling the lis pendens because of a technicality. And because of that no second chance rule, they couldn't refile it.
Wow, so even though they might have had a legitimate claim, they lost their opportunity to protect their interest in the property.
That's right. It's a cautionary tale for anyone who's involved in a lawsuit where lis pendens might be necessary. You got to pay attention to the details and make sure you're on top of those deadlines.
Okay, well, this is definitely making me rethink my whole buying a house is easy mindset.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as it might seem on the surface.
All right, so we've covered what a lis pendens is, how it works, and even some of the legal pitfalls that you need to be aware of. But I feel like we're just scratching the surface here. What about the bigger picture? How does a lis pendens affect the overall real estate market?
That's a great question, and it's something we should definitely explore further. Because a lis pendens doesn't just impact the people who are directly involved in the lawsuit. It can actually have ripple effects throughout the entire market.
That's what I was thinking. If a property suddenly becomes unavailable because of a legal battle, doesn't that affect everyone, not just the buyer and seller who are directly involved? We'll dig into that and a lot more when we come back.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is so fascinating about lis pendens is how it can impact the entire real estate market, not just the specific property that's involved in that lawsuit.
Right, and that's kind of what I was getting at before the break. We talked about how a property can be kind of frozen by a lis pendens. But does that have like a ripple effect on the whole market?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to think about it this way. When a property gets tied up in a lawsuit and it can't be sold, it's essentially taken out of the market. It's like it disappears. And that means there are fewer homes available for buyers. And that can push prices up for all the other properties that are still out there.
So it's like this chain reaction.
Exactly. And it's not just about the actual sale being blocked. The mere existence of a lis pendens can make buyers really hesitant. It creates uncertainty. It adds risk. And that can lead to buyers making lower offers or even backing out of deals completely.
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, who wants to get involved in a legal battle when you're just trying to buy a place to live?
Right. And that hesitation from buyers can put a seller in a really tough position. They can't sell the property. They might be facing mounting legal costs, and they could end up losing a significant amount of money.
So it sounds like a lose-lose situation for everyone involved.
Yeah, it can be.
So let's say you're a seller and you find yourself in a situation where there's a lis pendens on your property. What are your options?
Well, the best case scenario is to try to resolve the lawsuit quickly. I mean, the faster you can settle that dispute, the sooner that lis pendens can be removed.
But sometimes lawsuits can drag on for years.
Oh yeah, they definitely can. And that's why it's so important for sellers to be upfront with potential buyers. Transparency is absolutely key here. If you're trying to sell a property with a lis pendens, you need to be open and honest with buyers and keep them informed about what's happening with the lawsuit.
So are you saying that even with a lis pendens?
You can still try to market the property and find a buyer who's willing to take on that risk. It's possible. It might take a little longer to find the right buyer, but it's not impossible. Some buyers might even see it as an opportunity to negotiate a lower price because of that added risk.
So there's a bit of a gamble on both sides.
There's always some level of risk in any real estate transaction. But yeah, a lis pendens definitely adds another layer of complexity.
Now, what about from a legal perspective?
Yeah.
Is there anything a seller can do to fight back?
Yeah.
If they believe that the lis pendens was filed unfairly?
Yes, absolutely. Seller can challenge the lis pendens in court. They can file a motion to have it canceled, or what's called bonded off.
Bonded off. What does that mean?
So basically, bonding off a lis pendens means that the court allows the lis pendens to be removed if the person who filed it, the plaintiff, puts up a bond.
So it's kind of like a financial guarantee in case the plaintiff loses the lawsuit and the property was wrongly affected.
Exactly. It's a way to protect the defendant, the property owner, from potential financial losses if it turns out that the lawsuit had no merit.
It's good to know that there are some options.
Yeah.
If you think that a lis pendens is being used against you unjustly.
Yeah, the legal system is there to try to address these situations and to make sure that lis pendens are being used fairly.
Okay, this is all super helpful. But one thing I keep coming back to is what happens if a lis pendens just keeps dragging on and on? The lawsuit goes way beyond those initial 3 years, and the property is stuck in this kind of legal limbo. What are the long-term consequences of that?
That's a really important question. Because a prolonged lis pendens can have some pretty serious consequences. It's not just about a delayed sale. It can actually impact the value of the property. Well, if a property is essentially off limits for years because of a lis pendens, it's going to become less desirable to buyers. Lenders are going to be more cautious about financing it. And that uncertainty can really drive down the perceived value of the property.
It's like that car that's been sitting in a garage for a decade.
Exactly.
It might still run, but it's probably lost a lot of its value.
And it's not just about the money. A lingering lis pendens can completely derail people's plans. Imagine you're a homeowner and you were hoping to sell your property to help fund your retirement or to pay for your kids' education. Suddenly, those plans are put on hold.
And I can only imagine the emotional stress that comes with that.
Yeah, it can be incredibly anxiety-inducing. You know, homeownership is supposed to be about security and stability. A lis pendens disrupts that and creates a lot of uncertainty about the future.
It's a good reminder that real estate isn't just about buildings and transactions. It's about people's lives. So we spent a lot of time talking about the potential downsides of lis pendens. But let's shift gears for a moment and think about the bigger picture. Why does this legal tool even exist? What's the rationale behind it?
I'm glad you asked that. Because even though it might seem like a roadblock at times, the purpose of a lis pendens is actually rooted in fairness and protecting property rights.
Okay, that's interesting.
Tell me more.
So it sounds like lis pendens, while it can definitely be disruptive, can cause delays and complications, it actually serves a really important purpose.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, it's all about transparency and making sure that everyone's rights are protected. When you've got a lawsuit that could determine, who owns a property or who has the right to control it, that's when a lis pendens comes into play.
So it's like a safety net to prevent someone from buying a property that's, caught up in this legal battle.
Imagine you're just about to close on your dream home. You've gone through all the steps, you've signed the paperwork, and then suddenly you find out that someone else is claiming that they own the property. I mean, that would be a nightmare.
Yeah, that's definitely not the housewarming gift you're hoping for.
Right. And that's exactly where a lis pendens comes in. It's basically a big warning sign that says, hey, hold on, there's a legal fight going on over this property. So proceed with caution. It protects potential buyers from unknowingly walking into a really messy situation.
And it also protects the person who filed the lawsuit, right? The plaintiff?
Absolutely. It protects the potential interest in the property. If they end up winning that lawsuit, they don't want to find out that the property's already been sold to someone else.
So it helps to kind of maintain the status quo while the lawsuit is being decided?
Exactly. It prevents the property from changing hands during the litigation so that whatever the court decides can actually be enforced.
This is making a lot more sense now. It's like, lis pendens might seem like an obstacle at first, but it's actually there to make sure things are fair and to protect everyone's property rights in these real estate transactions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's been so insightful to dive into this with you. I think we've all gained a much clearer understanding of what lis pendens is all about and why it matters.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
And to our listeners out there, we hope you found this deep dive helpful. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when you're navigating something as complex as real estate. We encourage you to keep learning about lis pendens and think about some of the broader questions we've raised today. How does this legal tool impact the health of the New York real estate market? Does it make the market more stable, or does it create more uncertainty? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so connect with us on social media and let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, keep diving deep.